Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a revisited look at the iPhone SE 2, aka the 2020 release edition, as we are heading into 2023. And perhaps the biggest reason to pick one up now would be the value. In fact, during Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales during the holiday season, it could be found new on prepaid networks such as Straight Talk for as low as $99, and that is a brand new condition iPhone without any contract. Back in the day, we almost never saw iPhones as being really value-oriented, but now we're talking about it in the context of this being a better deal than even many Android phones when it comes to the performance, as long as you're willing to make do with a slightly older design. But it is exciting to see iPhones becoming more accessible, and now that we also have the iPhone SE 3, aka the 2022 refresh of this phone that has still a identical design, just a slightly faster processor, in my opinion just makes the SE 2 a even better value. Apple continues to support their phones typically for around 5 to 6 years when it comes to software updates, so this phone will still receive updates for about 2.5 to 3 years into the future, rocking the latest iOS 16 and bound to receive updates to iOS 17 and 18 whenever those become available down the line. Packaging contents, of course, are super slim, and as expected, you have just a charging cable, which is a Lightning to USB Type-C, along with a iconic Apple sticker. So revisiting the hardware first, it's familiar. The classic iPhone, which has a 4.7-inch display, it's the same dimensions as the iPhone 6 that came out back in late 2014, so we are talking about a body now that's been around for 8 years. Time really does fly. Hence, Apple are able to reuse many of the parts, keeping the production costs lower, but packing in just a newer processor. Controversial for the fact that we have those bigger bezels due to the older 16:9 aspect ratio design of the display, still having a fingerprint scanner in the form of the Touch ID button at the bottom, so you're not going to get something quite as immersive compared to OLED display iPhones and even on the Android world, where budget devices are adopting a much more expansive display in this day and age. With that being said, for folks that are still looking for a smaller phone, that want something that can fit actually in your pocket without much hassle, that can still be one positive attribute of the iPhone SE 2, in that it is incredibly lightweight and ultra slim. The iPhone SE 2 comes in 3 colors. There's black, white, and the product red edition that we have here, which I do think is very vibrant and eye-catching. I do like this quite a bit, although all 3 variants will have a black bezel on the front. The SE 2 has a glass construction on the rear, so that's also reminiscent of the iPhone 8, but it makes good use of this by supporting Qi wireless charging. Although it doesn't have official support for MagSafe accessories, being able to wirelessly top it off is always good to see, and there is support for 18-watt charging using the standard Lightning port. Now, for folks coming from something like an iPhone 6 or even 6S, audio is one part which is definitely improved on the SE 2 because it now passes stereo speakers. Not only does it come out from the bottom, but the earpiece also dubs as a second speaker, and it makes a pretty dramatic difference in terms of volume, clarity, and depth. Although you are also missing a standard 3.5mm headphone jack that iPhones have really removed since the days of the iPhone 7. So you have to use a Lightning adapter or use AirPods or any Bluetooth headphones instead. Despite the super petite and lightweight frame, we are still rocking very powerful specs, inclusive of the Apple A13 Bionic processor, which is the same exact chipset found on the iPhone 11 Pro, delivering sometimes even better performance than the Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 processor found on phones like the Galaxy S20 Ultra, which were all around, again, the same age, coming out in late 2020. So although not the newest kid on the block anymore, this already gets you a very fast and fluid experience. We've also got the latest Wi-Fi 6, as well as Bluetooth 5.0, connectivity, GPS, everything that you would come to expect. The only spec though that is a little bit disappointing would be the smaller battery in this smaller chassis. In fact, it has a 1820 milliamp hour capacity cell, which is pretty much the same capacity on the other 4.7-inch sized iPhones. And because these days the operating system as well as a faster processor just uses up more juice, you'll be reaching for the charger often before the day completely ends. On the back, you'll find a 12 megapixel optical image stabilized camera along with a quad LED flash. It takes excellent photos, especially considering now the bargain price that you can find it at. Again, $100, sometimes even lower than that, $75 with refurbished. The only missing software feature would be a low light or a night vision mode, but we'll talk about that more later in this review. Overall, the corners of the phone are rounded off, again, like the other predecessors that we've seen before, making it very comfortable to hold. And we have just a power key, and then on the right-hand spine, we do have access to the classic mute key, which is a feature I do really like on iPhones, and you also find it on OnePlus devices, where you can quickly flick this key to instantly go into a silent mode if you're in a meeting, for example. You also have access to a volume rocker. All the buttons, of course, feel very tactile and clicky. Fit and finish is absolutely stunning, and nothing can be really said about the build quality since it's a metal plus glass finish. Again, on the front, we have that 4.7-inch Retina display. On the top here, there is a 7 megapixel selfie camera. Now, by Retina, it's technically HD plus resolution, so a little bit sharper than 720, but on a smaller display like this, which again stretches 4.7 inches diagonally, you're still talking about a relatively good PPI count, and things are still sharp enough. Colors look good thanks to the True Tone, so it's using the sensors here to detect what the light is like in your surroundings, and then it compensates by adjusting the color temperature to match your environment. Although it's not going to be quite as contrasty as OLED or AMOLED when it comes to blacks, it's still an excellent display and one of the best IPS LCD screens that you'll find on the market, which reaches a peak brightness of 625 nits. Again, there's something nostalgic about the way the iPhone SE2 feels because it really is the best of yesteryear. Similar to the iPhone 7 and iPhone 8, if you are coming from an even older device like a 6S or before, there has been a change in how the home button feels because technically this is not a button that presses down anymore, but rather it's a kind of capacitive sensor, which you have to tap with the flesh on your finger, and then there is the haptic vibration that is done to simulate the experience of pressing down. The benefit is there's no moving parts and also allows this phone to be IP67, so that's also pretty rare to find, especially in this budget price range now, a phone that is going to be water resistant. You can take it to the shower, splash some water on it, and it will still survive. Let's actually take a closer look at the camera performance first. So as aforementioned, this is still a very solid shooter, and you're getting a fast and fluid experience, even though the hardware doesn't give you quite as much versatility as some of the more expensive, newer iPhones that may have additional telephoto lens as well as ultra-wide-angle lens. On here is just one camera sensor, a little bit reminiscent of how Google Pixel used to handle things. But that one classic 12 megapixel sensor is very good, coupled with excellent computational photography tricks powered by that Bionic A13 chip, and we're talking about still a very reliable photography experience, and you're able to simulate things like additional lighting effects, contour effects, as well as some of the additional color effects that you can play around with can all be found on here. iPhones in particularly, though, really do lead in terms of video performance. So this one can shoot up to 4K, 30 frames per second, and it's the stabilization as well as the quality of the microphone pickup, which makes video recording and vlogging one of the highlights of iPhones, and that same can be said about the SE2 with its optical stabilized footage. We can see how true to life all the colors seem. There's more of a subtle vibrancy here compared to what Pixel and Samsung does, which tends to offer a little bit more of a kind of over-saturated look versus the iPhone is a little bit more muted, but still is very pleasant in terms of the details. Overall, I would say the photo quality is still more than serviceable. As we head deeper into 2023, it's still a very competitive system that gets the basics right. You won't find, again, too much extras here, but still reliably captures your shots. Now jumping into a quick demo of video playback and also what the speakers sound like. All right, so some takeaways here being that, again, the speaker quality here is excellent, especially compared to older generation iPhones. You get a lot more depth and volume as a result. So there is more than enough power underneath the hood for you to do anything that you would possibly want. Let's actually go into a quick web browsing test here. And perhaps one thing to note is, yes, the iPhone has excellent haptics, and you can also rotate the screen sideways to, say, get a slightly larger keyboard, but at the end of the day, a 5-inch phone is never going to be quite as spacious to type on as a device that has a 6 or a 7-inch screen. So this is something that will require a little bit more of a relearning or really getting used to it again after becoming accustomed with larger displays. But if you're someone that has been still using or clinging onto an older iPhone, then for you, it's going to still feel right at home. And ultimately, it's still a very sensitive display, which offers, again, 10 fingers of multi-touch support. And so you can see here, the overall web browsing experience is also still extremely fast. Animations load without a hiccup, and thanks to Wi-Fi 6 plus the A13 Bionic, you don't have to wait at all for even the most complex of web pages to load. Everything is still buttery smooth, as you can see there, iPhone fluidity that we've come to expect, where everything really just works and flies, in fact, in terms of how quick things are to load, and still swipe up to bring up the notification shade to access things like stream brightness toggles, turning on different wireless controls, and you get a handful of free built-in iOS apps that we've come to expect, like Keynote and Pages, which, if you're unfamiliar, it's basically Apple's equivalent of PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. So all of these kind of document editing tools you do have pre-built in actually on the iPhone by default, including also GarageBand is another free app that's built on in, but on the Android side, there really is no equivalent that you would get bundled in, which are some software perks that if you're trying to get a similarly kind of pro-grade music editing tool, if you're an Android user, and kind of find your own third-party solution. You can even play back games on here, including titles that are more graphically demanding, whether it's PUBG, Asphalt, Sky, which is we have here in this demo, and everything still loads back super quickly. You're only slightly limited by, again, perhaps a smaller screen, so if you have tiny controls, it might not be quite as intuitive to always navigate around with, but you're still having plenty of power that technically moving around and actually playing the game still feels super fast and fluid. Just keeping in mind that you have a slightly smaller battery as well, so you do have to sometimes take a few breaks and have it top up again, but the raw power in this unit still is very impressive. So that's more or less it as far as our revisited look at the iPhone SE2 as we head further into 2023. And when it comes to the question of is it still worth it in terms of performance, considering this phone in terms of picking it up in general, the answer is still absolutely yes, especially at this rock bottom price. You're still getting a very fluid experience when it comes to day-to-day usage, even including gaming, just thanks to the still very powerful A13 Bionic chipset, dependable camera, very good build quality, still offers, again, a surprisingly good experience as a compact, but still very modern and solid performing smartphone.